If you're having issues with your launches and you're having issues with your funnels, either your launches are plateaued, they're not growing, maybe they're declining, or they never took off in the first place, I'm just going to tell you, this episode you're about to listen to, I just recorded it. And I think it is one of the best episodes that I've ever recorded on this entire podcast. But it's definitely the best episode that I have recorded when it comes to messaging in the last year alone. If not the best episode we've ever had on this podcast. Again, if you have a launch that is not performing, it's plateaued, it's declining, or never took off, this may be the most powerful episode you listen to all year. So with that said, keep on listening.
Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, we have an amazing episode for you, just like we always do. But this one's really special to me. I sat down to write this guide. I sat down to write this PDF, this new opt-in that we're working on. And, for us, we always base everything off of behavior. One of the reasons why our launches work really well is because we base everything off of behavior, the data, what's resonating with our audience. We just pay attention to what's working. And they're like, let's just do more of that in our funnel. Let's do more of that in our launches. And they just work because we're using messaging and topics and copy that we know already works. We're not guessing when we roll into a launch. And one of the topics that we've been hearing over and over again, especially on our sales calls, we've been doing a lot of sales calls over the last couple months. And one of the things we realize is people are having issues with their launches. So either the main three issues are this: launches are either plateaued, meaning that they're doing okay, they're bringing in sales, but you just can't grow them or scale them. Number two is that the launches are declining. So they were doing okay at a certain level, and now they're on, dipping down, or they just never really took off in the first place. And so we're hearing on our calls, a lot of these calls that, like people are like, oh, I just want to do one more launch. I'm gonna get through one more launch. My launches, I need to be bigger. My launches aren't doing very well, and things like that. So what we decided to do is we actually put together this PDF, this guide on how to craft messaging for launches. So we started to go through all the stuff that we've done over the last couple of years. And I started to look at our best performing launches, our worst performing launches. What were the commonalities? What were things we did well? What were the things that we did wrong? And then even the launches I've been a part of. So I've been a part of some of the biggest launches in the space. Like I remember I first started helping James Wedmore with his video series when they were doing $800,000. And then now they're doing $7 million launches. And obviously there's a lot that goes into that, but we helped transform the messaging on that. I've helped Jim Fortin with a lot of his multi-7-figure launches. And we've obviously created our own 7-figure launches. And I started going through everything and going like, wow, this is what we did every single time. There's 2 language patterns we did every single time. And what I want to do in this episode is break that down for you. I want to break down what we did every time we do a great launch. We followed this process to a T. Now, what's amazing, what's beautiful about this guide that we wrote is I sat down and I was like, I'm going to make it super easy. I'm just going to make it super bite size. I'm just going to go through maybe a title framework for their webinar, maybe a headline framework for the ad. And then I'm 13 pages in on a Google Doc writing this thing. It's 5,500 words because it just kept going. I just kept going. I just kept writing. I just kept going deeper and deeper. And what I wanted to do in this episode is just kind of give you an overview of what is in that PDF. And at the very end of this episode, we're going to give you a link. So if you do want to go download that you want to go download that guide, it's there for you. We're going to have it ready. It's ready right now as we release this episode for you to go download. And I want you to go download it and I want you to look through it. And the reason why this is so important is because over the next year, 6 months to a year, what we're doing, and in fact, we've already been doing it inside of our program, is focusing on messaging for launches and sales funnels, sales calls. It's like messaging for sales. So inside our NGM Plus, our mentorship program, we're incorporating so much of sales-based messaging. And so for the longest time, we've always focused on here's what you need in the upfront stuff. Here's what you need for content. Here's what you need for emails. But we never really went headfirst into, okay, here's what you need to say specifically for sales. We're getting into a lot of sales. And our program actually walks you through how to develop these webinars, these live presentations, how to develop your launch messaging and all that stuff. So I'm really, really excited to go through this episode because it's kind of the first announcement, so to speak, into this new direction of our expansion and our evolution, which is great. Last year we had this announcement of our evolution talking about how I'm going to dive a lot more into subconscious communication. And we've done that. And in fact, the subconscious communication is what's allowed our launches to do even better. And so that was kind of our announcement and my focus over the last year. And then my focus this upcoming year is going to be focused on sales messaging, launch messaging, and all that stuff, objection busting, how to overcome objections in the middle of a presentation so they don't even come up on sales calls, all sorts of stuff. It's going to be good. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's just go ahead and dive in. As we created this, I started going through a lot of different things and looking at a lot of really cool stuff that we've done. And what I came to realize is over the last 4 years, we've created 4 different products. NGM, NGM Plus, $1 Million Messaging Mentorship, Video 4X. And each one has done over $1 million in annual sales, like lifetime sales. Each one is probably in multi-millions, but they've each done over $1 million in sales. We've done 3 different launches that have done over 6 figures. We've done 10 launches that this one kind of blew my mind over the last 5 years that have done multiple 6 figures or more. We've helped create and manage multi 7-figure launches between a lot of our clients. In fact, and this one kind of blew my mind. In fact, I haven't done a launch that's done under 6 figures in 8 years. That one blew my mind because sometimes you get to a certain level and you're just like, okay, this is normal. This is normal. This is normal. But I remember the days where I'm like, I just want to do like a $30,000 launch. I want to do a $50,000 launch. And I remember being in the car with James one time and his business was at the point ahead of mine. And I remember he did like a $250,000 launch, then a $500,000 launch. And then I think they did 800,000. And I remember in the car with him, he said, yeah, it just kind of blows my mind because I'm at a place now that if I did a $100,000 launch, that would be a bad launch. And I remember thinking like, God, that's the life, right? That's the dream. I would love to be in that position. And we're there. So it was a moment of me realizing like, wow, like just sit back for a second and realize where you're at, like what you've gone through, what you've accomplished. And that one really hit me. It was like, I never realized that we had haven't done a launch that's done under 6 figures in 8 years. That's crazy. In fact, our last launch last year did 340,000 and we were like, oh my God, we failed. And I was like, and I was just thinking like, what a crazy place to be in. So the question becomes like, how do we do this? Well, that's exactly what we're going to cover in this episode. That's exactly what this PDF will cover for you as well. Now, the person that's going to get the biggest breakthrough from this episode or the PDF is someone who has an amazing course or you have a coaching program or service, but your launches have plateaued. Or worse, some of you probably, every time you launch, you're left disappointed and you're left thinking like the sales should be much higher. This can help so many people. This information's great. This is my best information. I don't know why it's not working. And you just don't understand why people aren't buying. So if you're like most people, when you launch and you go to sell, it feels like you have to convince or to explain, and you're using things like bonuses in order to try and get people to buy. So you're delivering gold, you're delivering content you're proud of, and information that took you years to gain, but everyone just says things like, thanks, thanks, Brandon, I'll see you later. Or thanks, like this has been great. Or this is amazing information, thank you. And then they leave and then they never return to buy. So that's incredibly frustrating. I've been there, but it's incredibly frustrating because if you're like most people, you've probably been told like, okay, you need to give your best stuff away for free or just follow this proven webinar framework, these launch frameworks and these strategies and the sales will come. But then they never do. They don't. So you run into this thing where you're like banging your head against the wall because you've done everything the experts or the gurus or the industry norms have told you to do, and it's still not working. Or maybe the type of person where you've had launches work in the past, but now you're stuck. Now you're declining. So if your launches have been plateaued or are plateaued, they are declining, or they never really took off, this PDF in this episode that we're doing right now may be one of the most powerful ones that you listen to or read the entire year. And I know it's a big, bold promise, but it's true, because what I'm about to reveal to you, we've used every single time we've done a very successful launch. Now, after working with 1,700 businesses online that are selling courses, selling programs and services, we found there's two things. Okay. So I've already told you that there's two things that all these launches have had. These two things were present in every successful launch we've done. And to this day, I have never found a successful ad, launch, funnel, or sales process that didn't have these two things mastered. Now, I want to say that again. In fact, I have never found a successful ad, launch, funnel, or sales process that didn't have these two things mastered. What I'm saying to you is I'm about to reveal some concepts to you that you need to incorporate in your launch. But these are concepts that will also work in ads. They will work in content. They will work in emails. They need to be incorporated everywhere, but specifically they need to be incorporated into your launch. So what I'm going to do is kind of break down, I'm going to, my exact process for communicating and crafting messaging that pulls people in, creates automated desire, demand, and engagement throughout your entire launch. In fact, what I'm about to show you is so powerful that on our last launch, we had done almost $300,000 in sales before the cart had even opened. This is from people that never saw our sales page. This is from people that just attended the launch and were like, Brandon, shut up and take my money. Just let me have it. Okay. So give it to me now. I'm in, right? That's what we want. We want messaging inside of your launch that's so powerful that people don't need the sales page to buy. And again, this is the number one thing that my students ask me all the time. It's like, Brandon, how do I get my sales page to convert better so that I can make more sales? And I said, well, first of all, let's get your launch to a place where you're going to make sales even if you don't have a sales page. In fact, our program, NGM Plus, we've been selling it all year and it has open enrollment. We sell people into it every month. We don't even have a sales page for it. It's just a Google Doc of like the deliverables for the people that even ask to see it. Most people don't even ask to see it. So if you're like most people, you're probably asking, okay, Brandon, I'm ready. You sold it. Let's do it. Let's dig in. What are these two things? So I'm going to tell you what they are. I'm going to reveal what they are right now, but you may not know exactly what they are right now. And we're going to dive into it in the last part of this episode. We go through the details of it. There's some things we need to cover first. So I'm going to tell you what they are, but you need to understand, you may not understand what they are. You need to acknowledge it. May not understand what these are when Brandon says it, but trust me, if you stay to the end of this episode, I will break down exactly what they are and how you can start using them. Okay. So the first one that we need for your launch to work is what I call self-identifying language. You need to create self-identifying language. Again, you may not know what that is. You will by the end of the episode, but basically I want you to talk in a way where the audience comes to their own conclusion of, I trust this person. I trust their solution. I trust their ability to solve the problem. And I have this internal automated desire to keep moving forward, to move to the next step with them. Okay. So self-identifying language. It'll be broken down in that self-identifying language. We want in the ad headlines. We want it in your ad. We want it on the headline of the webinar. We want it everywhere. Okay. Now, the next thing that we need is what I call automated decision-making communication. Now, automated decision-making communication is a part of self-identifying language. Okay. But we need to address it by itself so it makes sense. Now, again, these may sound very complex, but they're not. These two things are very easy concepts to understand. However, the trick is that it's going to take some time and practice to master. So the example I always use is it's like riding a bike. Riding a bike is a very easy concept to understand, right? Just bounce on the bike, pedal to move forward, use your brakes to slow down and stop. Makes sense. Everyone understands it. They get it. Boom. Easy concept to understand, riding a bike. But just because you understand the concept doesn't mean you're going to master it. Okay. So one of the things inside of launches that most people ask me about is like, how do I add value and I don't teach too much? And I tell them, well, just paint the pathway, give them examples. They need to understand the concept and how it works. But what you need to do is make sure that you tell people that your offer isn't just about giving them the concept. It's about helping them integrate it, right? So it's like, for me, when we talk about NGM Plus, yeah, I'm going to give you the frameworks and the course and the materials and all that stuff, but it's really about integration. It's about helping you integrate it. So it's the equivalent of, instead of just giving you a course on how to ride a bike, it's like, okay, I'm standing next to you, like holding you and guiding you, telling you not to make that mistake or raise your awareness. Hey, you're running this way, and helping you actually integrate it so you get the results faster. Okay. So, what are these two things? Well, let's dive into a little bit of what they are and how they play out. I'll just tell you this, like, you're listening to this podcast right now. You likely got an email from me, or like it populated on your phone, or maybe someone shared it with you. And then you ended up here listening. But that process of being here on the episode didn't require you to think about anything, meaning that it just because someone shared it with you, it doesn't mean you're going to automatically click and listen. I get shared stuff all the time, and I look at it and I'm like, I'm not clicking on that. But I didn't even logically think about it. I didn't sit there and go like, should I click on this? Should I listen to this person? Do I trust this person? Is this gonna be worth my time? I just read whatever the title is and I go, nope, or yes. And I do that automatically. And then even the fact that you're still listening right now, there's something that I said, there's words that I said, there's communication that I gave that caused you to go like, I need to stay here. I need to keep listening. It usually shows up in the form of emotions. Like, I'm really excited. I'm really eager. Oh my God, this person's speaking to me. And those thoughts happen automatically. 99% of the time when we consume content, we click on something, we opt in for something, we are not thinking about it logically or consciously. We read it, and what's happening is our subconscious is telling us that's relevant to you, that's interesting to you, that's going to be beneficial to you, and is usually coming up in the form of emotion. It's getting you to go ahead and say, this is what you need, or this is relevant to you. Click, opt in, stay, don't stay, leave, or you're bored, or this is not relevant to you. So the decision to keep taking those steps forward is actually done by your subconscious. Now, if you know that and can recognize that, then you're already 10 steps ahead of everyone else, because most people never even recognize that. And what we need to realize next is that if we are doing it, if you're doing that right here, you're literally doing it here. It's how you ended up here. And it's how you, if you decide to read the guide, is how you end up reading the guide. You have to realize that that's what your audience is doing too. So you made automated decisions without logically thinking about it, caused you to be here right now. You've probably felt emotions like curiosity, excitement, eagerness, and it caused you to keep moving forward willingly. Like, you're willingly listening. You're willingly clicking on the email or the share that you got to listen to this in the first place. Now, this is how everyone is consuming content. This is how your people are deciding to show up to the live event or not to show up, to stay or not to stay, to buy or not to buy, to opt in or not to buy. All those decisions are literally made that way. They're made automatically. Now, this is really important, because if you don't understand that, you will never, your chances of you fixing your launches is going to be slim to none. The reason why it's slim to none is because the current communication you have is not allowing your audience to make the automated decisions you need in order to turn them into sales. Which means whatever you're doing, whatever you're teaching, however you're communicating, is not speaking to the subconscious of your audience to get them to take the steps you want them to take, the steps you need them to take. It's just not working. And when we start to understand, like, okay, they're making automated decisions, then we can start to ask the questions of like, well, how do I get them to make the automated decision to stay or to leave? And again, you're never going to have 100% of anything. But there are certain ways to take your knowledge, your skills, your information, your headlines, your topics, and communicate them differently so they land deeper with your audience. I'll give you an example of how this works. If my son had Legos all over the floor of his room, and I walk in there and I say, William, clean up your room right now. God damn it, Will. Like, why is your room always dirty? And why do you just clean it up, man? Come on. what do you think is going to happen? Like, I'm probably really likely to make him feel like crap, number one, but number two, I'm probably not going to get the result that I want. I'm probably going to get some sort of resistance. But if I take the same thing, I have this knowledge of like, okay, Legos need to be clean, and I'm trying to communicate it to Will so that he understands and willingly cleans his room. I'm going to want to communicate it totally different. So what I would probably do is say, hey, Will, looks like you're having fun, man. Man, I never call him man. I don't know why I said that. But it'd be like, hey, Will, looks like you're having fun, bud. Like, I love Legos. That's awesome. Maybe we can play Legos tomorrow or something like that. What do you think? Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, I notice you're not playing Legos right now, and you're actually on your computer right now, and the Legos are actually on the floor. Did I ever tell you the story of when I was a kid and I stepped on Legos because I had them out like that? No, I didn't. Well, I stepped on one of them, and it was one of the most painful things I've ever experienced. And then because I kind of jumped in pain, my other foot landed on the other Legos, and I actually sliced my foot right open. And I know it doesn't seem like these Legos are very dangerous, but they can be if we leave them out there. So I was thinking, what if we just clean them up and put them on the side of the room so that you don't get hurt, your sisters don't get hurt, I don't get hurt. More importantly, again, like, Will, I don't want you to get hurt. And then if you want to play with them again, we'll just bring them right out. What do you think? Now, it's the same end goal, the same sort of thing that I want. I want the Legos to be clean. However, I changed the way I communicated so I wasn't setting these automated responses that Will may have that go against the outcome I wanted. Where if I went with the first approach, his automated reaction he's going to have without thinking about it is going to be resistance. Why are you being mean to me? Why? Again, these are all automated decisions he's making that don't allow me to get the result I want. However, when I change my communication, I then change his automated response to be more in alignment with the outcome that I want. And he does it willingly. And again, it's just changing the way in which you communicate. I'm a firm believer that 90% of arguments in the world come down to poor communication. Most people don't know how to communicate. They just communicate from their perspective, what I want. Let me just deliver all this information with no consideration of how you're going to receive it. And then then you sit there and you wonder why my ads aren't converting, my launch isn't converting, or whatever it may be. So again, that means if your ads aren't converting, no one's showing up, no one's engaging, no one's buying, then there's something off in the communication that's causing them to leave. Now, in most cases, you probably don't see how the messaging, or your audience isn't seeing how your messaging communication content's relevant to them. It's going to help them, or is different than anyone else. So this is why automated decision-making communication is so important. Automated decision-making is exactly what I just displayed with you with Will. So with Will, it was, how do I communicate so I get the automated decision that I want him to have? Okay. Let me give you another example. Well, actually, let's go here. So hopefully you guys get the idea and the gist of what that automated decision-making communication is. It's communicating in a way where people go like, yep, makes sense. I'm taking the next step. Yep, makes sense. I'm taking the next step. The next part is self-identifying. So what is self-identifying? I want you to look at how you open up this podcast episode, or how I started talking about this podcast episode. I actually started talking about the problems, and I was very clear on who this guide was for. You know, I had said things like, the person who's going to get the most value from this is the person who's doing launches that have plateaued. You're sitting there saying information, delivering your best information, and people are responding with, this is great, but they never buy, right? You remember that? I started this episode with very specific problems, very specific situations, very specific circumstances you're going through that are causing your launches to be stuck. The reason why I did that is I wanted you to come to your own conclusion that this podcast is for me. This podcast is about me. This podcast will be worth my time. I wanted you to decide for yourself, I have the problem that Brandon is talking about. I did this because I didn't want to have to convince you that you have a problem, and I didn't want to have to convince you that I can solve it for you. I wanted you to self-identify and come to your own conclusion. Wow, this is really relevant to me. This is exactly what I'm going through, and this is going to be worth my time. So too many course creators and service providers spend so much, just way too much time trying to convince people that they have a problem. It's so much easier selling to people When you focus on the problems they already know they have. So a lot of the times when you're talking about problems they're not aware that they have. And that's the biggest messaging problem that people have in launches. Here's a perfect example of this. When I first got started 5 years ago in this business teaching messaging, no one knew messaging was the problem. Their awareness level was not there. So anytime I would say like, hey, you want this guide on messaging? You want to master your messaging? Get on this free webinar to master your messaging. No one would opt in. It was crickets. And I was so confused. I'm like, this is the problem that people have. I know this is the problem people have. The issue was the audience didn't know that was the problem they had. So everything I did when I used that language bombed. So what I did is I asked myself is, okay, Brandon, they don't know that messaging is a problem. What is happening in their life? What circumstances are being created? What events are being created that they don't want because their messaging is off? And I realized it was things like failed launches, no engagement on content, high ad costs, stuff like that. So what I started to do is start to use language like, hey, are you a course creator who puts out great content but never gets engagement? Well, if you are, I'm hosting a webinar. It's going to show you how to get the highest engagement you've ever seen. And then all of a sudden it took off. All my messaging was taking off because I started to address the problem people were aware they had. And I didn't get so hung up on, nope, I got to convince them it's messaging. It's like, no, I'm just going to speak to their circumstance, their real lived reality that they don't want anymore. And then that creates hyper relevancy. So now they're like, okay, this is exactly what I'm going through. But then on the webinar, I can bridge the gap and make them aware that it's messaging, but I never want to lead with that. So when we made this switch, we actually did $1 million in sales in 9 months. Now, here we are 5 years later, and people are very aware that messaging is the problem now. So even the title of this episode and the title of our guide is messaging for launches, or messaging that can 3x your launch results, or something like that. I'm leading with messaging because people are aware now that messaging is the issue. So I can use that in my messaging. It's like messaging inception. So again, we have to find the problems that people are actually going through in order to get them to self-identify this is relevant for me. And that's even how I started this episode as well. I talked about failed or plateaued or declining launches because I want you to self-identify, wow, Brandon's talking about the exact problem that I'm going through. And at the same time, it also pushes people away who are not going through those problems right now. Okay. So again, it's about getting you to self-identify and come to your own conclusion. I have that problem. Brandon's talking about me. And what starts to happen is you start to assume that I actually have the solution because I so accurately and specifically describe what you're going through, what you're experiencing. You will actually come to your own conclusion. Brandon has the solution. Okay. So I'm going to dive deeper in on this in a little bit and talk to you about how we can start piecing these together. But I want to be very clear and upfront with a couple things. I've done this enough, and I have been around the block enough, and I've had enough conversations, worked with enough people that I know there are 3 things that are going to stop you from perfecting your launches and changing your launch messaging. There are 3 things that time and time again, I hear it all the time on sales calls. Brandon, I'm just going to do this instead. And then I'll come back to the messaging and I sit there and go, but you're just going to repeat the same thing. And 90% of the time they do. In fact, it's closer to 100% of the time they do. Okay. So the first thing that you need to avoid is when your launches aren't working, stop moving to a different strategy. We see this all the time. When a launch doesn't perform, people just go like, okay, it's just another strategy. I'm going to go from a live launch to a challenge, or a webinar to a live launch, or a video series to this, or this to that. Or I hear things like, I just need more leads. That's the problem. I need better quality leads. It's like, hello, what do you think is going to bring you better quality leads? Your messaging. It's like, why do you think the strategy didn't work? You think because the strategy sucks, even though that same strategy works for thousands and thousands of people? You think you're the one person that it just doesn't work for? No. If you give me any strategy, I will likely make it work because I understand my messaging. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to realize that when a strategy doesn't work, most of the time it isn't because of the strategy. It's because of the communication within the strategy. That's why we see people being successful with webinars and video series and live challenges and live launches and all sorts of stuff. Everyone's successful with every strategy. That's how the strategies even gain popularity, is because they work. So I will say though, that certain businesses might do better with a certain strategy. There are new strategies that could technically work better than anything. But here's the thing. If you use a strategy and you aren't getting any sales, you're having subpar launches, changing the strategy likely won't work. The time when strategies tend to really work is when a launch is already seeing momentum or some success, and you find a new strategy that just works better than the other one. But the point is your messaging already works. Now you're rearranging the messaging through a different strategy that's just working a little bit better. Okay. So communication within the strategy, well, let me put it this way. If you have a launch and it doesn't work and you don't change the communication, the likelihood of it just magically working because you change strategies is pretty slim to none. In fact, you can have great messaging and a crappy strategy and make sales. But if you have crappy messaging and a great strategy, you're likely not going to make any sales. Okay. So we want to first stop changing strategies all the time. Every time a launch doesn't work, that usually does not fix the problem. And again, I'm saying usually because in some cases it can, but 90% of the time it doesn't. In fact, I'm willing to bet that if you're here, you've tried multiple strategies already and still not working. The number two mistake is that people just try to launch again. And I hear this all the time, even on sales calls. People go, yeah, Ren, I want to join your program because my launches are plateaued. They're declining. They're not doing that well. I just can't figure out how to sell this. And I go, great, let's get you in. And they say, well, I'm going to do one more launch. And I'm going to use the money from that launch to join your program. And I kind of sit there and scratch my head and say, okay, you've done this launch twice. It doesn't work or hit the numbers you want. You're going to do the exact same thing one more time, just hoping that it will change and do better so that you can join the program that will fix the messaging. And it's like, if your launch does enough to make money to join the program, maybe you don't need help with messaging because you figured it out. Messaging is the thing that makes the launches work when they don't work. Doing the same thing again doesn't make the launch work. It's kind of like, I heard this metaphor the other day, or this analogy the other day, of this guy who asked someone, do you get clean before you go into the shower? And the guy's like, no. And he's like, well, why do you go in the shower? He's like, go in the shower to get clean. He's like, so you don't clean yourself off before you go in the shower? He's like, no, I go in the shower to get clean. And it's the same thing with failed launches. It's like, when you have a failed launch, do you do a failed launch again to try to make the money to join the program? No, you join the program so that you have the money, or so that your next launch produces the money to pay for the program. It's kind of like the be do have model. And look, I've been guilty of this too. There was a time where launches didn't perform. I would do it again and again, expect a different result. I would use excuses like my offer is bad, or the economy isn't great, or I just need more of a warm audience, or I would say like lead quality is not great, stuff like that. I don't know if I said this one, but offer needs to be improved. I would say that stuff all the time. And then I just realized, like, even in a bad economy, like, you can still make sales. It's just figuring out the angle and the messaging and the stuff that works. And when you have a warm audience, they were cold at one point, but you made them warm and then they're buying. So why can't you just speed up that process with messaging? And then when I talk about offer, what I didn't realize back then is, on our last launch, we did $300,000 in sales before cart open. No one knew what the offer was. They just knew they wanted it. And lead quality is always bad because your messaging sucks. You're not specific. You're letting everyone in. You're too generalized. You get these wrong people coming in. But when your messaging is good, you have the right people who are aware they have the problem and they know they want it fixed. And it's the best audience you'll ever have. So our last launch, like I said, did really well. We did the whole 300,000 before cart even opened. And what you have to realize is that we had 8 cold leads for every 1 warm lead in that launch. And we converted at 3% on a 3K and 10K offer. So let me say that again. 300,000 in sales before cart open. They didn't even know what the offer was. And we had 8 times the amount of cold leads versus warm leads. and we convert it 3% on a high ticket offer at 3K and 10K. So our leads also in that launch were some of the best cost per leads we've ever seen, again, because of the messaging. So launching again without changing your communication will lead to the same or the worst results 90% of the time. And I'm just kind of guessing at the 90% because I'm just basing it off of my own experience. But honestly, from my own experience, it's probably closer to 100% of people. I don't think to this day, I haven't seen a single person that said, Brandon, I want to join the program, but I'm going to wait for my launch to be successful and then I'll join. The launch, I have never seen someone pull out a better launch. And I hate saying it. And I know that's not true all the time, but that's just my experience. I hate saying it because I know how painful it is to go through a launch that's not performing. But again, I don't want you guys to make that same mistake. I don't want you, and this doesn't mean you have to join my program. Like, study the podcast, like study the things we're going through, look at the guides that we give. Like, I give out so much information that is enough for you to start changing the way you do your messaging, your launches. So don't keep doing the same launch over and over again. And then the next one is that people think that teaching sells. And we hear it all the time, like, give your best stuff away for free, add value, you'll make the sales. If you give people so much help, they'll feel inclined to buy from you. No, they don't. I'm sorry, but they don't. And you're probably in that spot where you've given out your best stuff. You've given out a lot of information and you aren't making any sales. So I do understand where it's coming from. You do want to help people. You do want to give some away your best stuff. Like, even today, I'm giving away really good stuff. But we can't just blindly give stuff away for free. We have to be intentional with how we teach, because how we teach is what's going to create the demand. How much information we give is going to determine whether someone gets overwhelmed or not. So if we just give our best stuff away for free blindly, you could have really negative consequences to that. And that's what a lot of people are dealing with right now. And if you've been following me for any amount of time, you've heard these examples. You've heard of Simon Sinek and Gary Vaynerchuk, Brene Brown, the holistic psychologist, Mel Robbins, Grant Cardone, Lewis Howes, who all have effective big audiences, effective content, millions in sales, and none of them are relying on endless amounts of tutorials, right? Again, it's like the whole TED Talk versus an encyclopedia thing. Even look at this podcast episode. Like, do you think you've gotten value from this podcast episode? Yes or no? Like, if you're still listening, you probably have. Like, it's entertaining. It's like ahas. You're realizing things. It's raising your awareness. But I haven't actually taught you how to do anything yet. You guys realize that? I haven't actually taught you how to do any of it. All I've done is just taught you what not to do. I've connected dots. I've raised your awareness to things you were unaware of before. And that's what we have to realize, is that just blindly teaching doesn't sell. And this is why sometimes you get those responses of, wow, that was great. That was amazing information. I'm so excited to go try this. And then there's no sales because you taught too much and you didn't create demand. So what we want to do is start putting this together. So let's start getting into the how. I will get into a little bit of the how, but I did want to make a point to realize, like, if you've gotten any value and you thought this was a great episode, just make that realization. I haven't actually taught you how. And even if I ended this episode right now, you probably would think, hopefully, well, that's a pretty good episode. Learn some stuff, but I didn't teach you anything. So let's start with the self-identifying language first. And if you've been in my ecosystem for a while, you've heard this example a million times, so just bear with me while I go through it again. But I'm going to give you an example of how this works. I want you to imagine you develop stomach pain. As soon as I say that, you've developed stomach pain, I know there's people in the audience who are like, oh my God, this example again. Because I use it all the time. And by the way, that's a great sign of great messaging, is when you use something all the time. And it just makes you a really powerful speaker, because you're not guessing and tweaking things on the go, right? You just know what works and you just continue to use it. So anyways, here's how self-identifying works. When this is done right, it's going to allow your audience to feel heard. It's going to make them feel seen, understood, and it's going to feel like you're talking directly to their situation. And when this happens, your audience starts to feel like an internal desire or demand into wanting to work with you. And what they start to do also is build an automated feeling of trust in your ability to solve the problem. Okay. So here's the example. Here's how it works. Imagine you developed the stomach pain and it started about 2 weeks ago. It starts at 7:30 at night, but it ends at 8:30 at night. And you have no idea what it is. You go to the doctor, you go to 9 doctors, and all 9 doctors have no idea what's wrong with you. Like, I'm sorry, I got no idea. I have no clue. I have no idea what's wrong with you. What are you going to feel? You're probably going to feel sad. You're going to feel depressed. You're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel hopeless, right? I want you to understand that that's what your audience is feeling right now. They have a problem and no one has been able to tell them what the problem is, why it's happening, or how to successfully fix it. That's why they still have the problem. So that feeling that you would have of that hopelessness, that depressed, that frustrated, and bang my head against the wall, that is what your audience is feeling right now. Now, I want you to imagine you go to the 10th doctor and the 10th doctor takes one look at you. You don't even say anything to the doctor. They take one look at you and they say, let me guess, stomach pain started 2 weeks ago. Starts at 7:30 at night and lasts till 8:30 at night. What are you going to do? What are you going to feel? Probably going to feel happy, excited, like, oh my God, there's an end in sight. Someone finally understands what's going on. Someone gets me. They're talking about me. I feel seen. I feel heard. Now I want you to imagine that doctor says to you, you have stomach loop. And then they go, so yeah, you got stomach loop. Well, anyways, nice to meet you. See you later. And they walk away. What are you going to do? You're going to chase that doctor down and you're going to go, doctor, how do I heal this? What's the solution? How do I fix this? What's the treatment? You're going to hunt that doctor down and you're going to ask them for the solution. Now, let me be very clear about something. That doctor never said they had a solution. That doctor never said they treated anybody with that. That doctor never showed you any case studies. That doctor never showed you any testimonials. That doctor never gave you an irresistible offer. They never added, quote unquote, added value in the form of education. They didn't teach you anything. That doctor never did any of the things that you have been told to do in order to sell. Yet you're chasing them down, asking, begging for the solution. That doctor created so much demand that they didn't need to sell you, explain to you the offer. They didn't need to sell you. Why? That doctor was so relevant, accurate, and specific in their diagnosis without you saying anything that you automatically trusted their ability to solve the problem. You came to your own conclusion. They can fix the problem. I want you to imagine for a second, you had that level of messaging, that level of communication in your launch where people are knocking down your doors to buy. They're literally pursuing you to sell them, to give them something. When you have that level of messaging, and then you do combine it with things like a great offer or a demand creating teaching style, or like even a good strategy, it's adding gasoline to a fire. But we have to remember the fire is actually the messaging. Everything else is the gasoline. The fire is what we want to build. Okay. And that's what great messaging is. That's what self-identifying language is we have to be able to communicate so relevantly, so specifically, without ever mentioning the solution, that people automatically go, wow, I need this. I need to work with this person. I trust their ability. Okay. So there's 3 things. There's actually 4, but I'm going to break down 3 of them for you right now. These are the 3 things that we actually focus on inside of NGM Plus. When you come into NGM Plus, these are the 3 things we dial in, and we actually spend the most amount of time dialing these 3 things in. The reason why is because they're that important. When you start to understand these 3 things, you can use them in content. You can use them in webinars. You can use them in emails. You can use them in ads. You can use them everywhere. Here's what they are. Specific problems, specific mistakes causing the problem, specific mistakes they make to try to fix the problem that don't work. These have to be specific, and they have to be accurate, and they have to, again, specifically and accurately describe what your audience is going through. They cannot be generalized. Here's how you know they're generalized. If I said you're overwhelmed, and I said that to 10 different stay-at-home moms, I'm going to get 10 different answers of what overwhelmed looks like. However, if I said You have to yell at your kids a minimum of 2 times every morning just to get them to listen. And it's a repeated cycle. And half the time they don't even eat their breakfast. And then you're running 5 minutes late out the door every day. You're either having that experience or you're not. And if I put that in an ad and you're having that experience, you're going to go, oh my God, that's me. And you're going to be paying attention on such a hyper level versus if I just said, hey, are you a stay-at-home mom who's overwhelmed? And that's why the specific problems are so important, because we start to use them everywhere. Same thing with the mistakes. If I said to you, like, you have stomach pain for 2 weeks and it lasts 7:30 at night and ends at 8:30 at night, and I bet you've tried Pepto-Bismol and it didn't work, you're probably going to feel like, oh my God, I did try that. Okay, this doctor understands me on a deeper level now, right? So that's the mistake, that you try to fix it, that doesn't work. If you go into the cause as well, you start to create this trifecta of messaging, titles, communication, where people go like, oh my God, that's me. And this is how you create that internal desire and demand. So where you want to start using this in your launch is, again, you're going to be using them everywhere. You definitely want to use it in your ads. You definitely want to use it in your emails. You want to use it in your sales mechanisms like webinars. You can even craft content before your launch to prep people for your launch using topics based off of these things. Okay. This is the number one reason why we did nearly 300,000 before Cart even opened in our last launch. So if you guys do this correctly, here's the things you're going to see: higher engagement and content, better results on ads and sales within your launch. And this will sometimes happen within days and even hours. However, it does take trial and error. It does take testing. It does take adjusting. It does take fine tuning. Even though it's like the bike example, even though you know what to do, uncovering this is a process. It takes time. There is a process to go through. Again, this is what we spend most of our time when people come into our program figuring out. Because even though you know what to do, it's hard to see what that's going to be. It's hard to test it. It's hard to analyze the data. But I'm telling you right now, when you nail it, oh boy, your launches will never be the same. I promise you that. They will never be the same. Now let's move into automated decision-making communication. What we want to do is I'm going to teach you 2 ways to do this. Now there's a lot of different ways in processes and frameworks and language patterns that you can use to create that automated decision-making communication. The point is this: you're going to have some areas where people need to move through in order to get to the sales page and buy, right? So you start with an ad or an invite. So it's an ad, it's an email, it's a social media post, whatever. Then they go to an opt-in page, then they go to the thank you page, then they go to the sales mechanism. They got to show up to that. And then they got to go to this sales page, and then they have to convert, right? So you have all these steps that they have to go through. If you know the right data points at each spot, you can start to identify, okay, this spot, the opt-in page, for example, it's converting at 19%. It's like, okay, that doesn't even hit the industry standard. There's a problem there. Let's fix it. Let's fix that problem. Let's look at all the automated decision-making communication that we need, and let's fix it. And this is how we start to fix launches. And this is how we work with our students. It's like, Brandon, my launch isn't working. My first question is, what does the data tell you? Where's the breakdown? Okay, let's look at the language patterns we can put here. Let's look at the messaging on the opt-in page. Let's look at the messaging on this part, and let's see where the disconnect is. And then we can go through and start to fix things. Okay. So here's pattern number 1 that you can use. This is how you teach and create demand at the same time. It's a process called backing it up. And it's very simple. We want to use metaphors, counterexamples, metaphor stories, counterexamples. What else? I think that's it. That's good enough for now. That's enough to get you rolling. So counterexamples, metaphors, analogies, and stories. And you want to use them after you teach something. And when you do this, it allows the subconscious mind to go, yes, that's true. Yes, that makes sense. And I'll tell you right now, if you teach something and your audience cannot figure out how that's going to work for them, or they don't think it actually works, or they don't see how it works, or they don't see how they're going to be able to use that in their specific situation, they will never buy from you because they do not trust your teachings. They do not agree with your teachings. So what we want to do is back up your teachings, right? So let me give you an example. If I gave you an example and I said, how-to content may not be the best way to build an audience online, and I said that in a webinar, there's a lot of people where the subconscious can be like, no, that's not true. That goes against my beliefs. That goes against what the industry has told me. I don't believe it. guess what? I'm not going to get them to buy. They don't trust my teachings. So what I want to do is I want to back it up, right? So instead of saying how-to content may not be the best way to build an audience, what I'm going to say instead is how-to content may not be the best way to build an audience. Look at Gary Vaynerchuk, Brene Brown, Mel Robbins, Tony Robbins. They all had big brands with tons of engagement on their content. And they never do endless amounts of tutorials or how-to content. They're all doing something different. Now the subconscious mind goes, holy crap, I never thought of that. I never realized that before. It's true. And it is true. You can't argue against that. That's literally what they're not doing. They aren't doing that. And I use the counterexample to back it up. So that now starts to create demand subconsciously. So I'm teaching and creating demand at the same time because they're like, well, what does Gary Vaynerchuk do? And what does Brene Brown do? Like, tell me more. So now I'm eliciting this emotion of like, give me more. Tell me more. I am staying. I am learning. I am excited. Oh my gosh, let's do this. Simply by backing it up. And most people don't do that. You just deliver 1 million gallons. That's not the right unit, but millions of gallons of information. Just loads and loads of information. And you're just hoping that they agree with you, but in most cases they won't. And you probably overwhelm them or you trick them into thinking they have everything they need. Okay. So we want to use backing it up. In fact, I've been using backing it up throughout this entire episode. I mean, how many examples did I use? How many metaphors have I used? How many analogies? Like the whole doctor analogy, right? The whole doctor analogy was me backing up and proving my point of what I'm talking about. I said, you need self-identifying language. Here's an example. Here's an analogy. Here's how it works. And it allows the subconscious mind to go, holy crap, I never realized that before. That is what would happen. Okay, he's on to something. I never realized that before. And this is how we start to create teachings inside of a launch that are extremely powerful. The next one is what we call tested proof. Tested proof, and I hate to say it, it just sounds very obvious. Most people don't know this. I don't think enough people are telling you to do this, but most people have failed launches because they're guessing at what's going to work. They're guessing at the title. They're guessing at the topic. They're guessing at the teachings. They're guessing at everything. They have no idea if it's going to work or not. And if you're reading this or listening to this episode, or we're going to read the guide that we're going to give you, chances are that's what you're doing with your launch. You don't know what's going to work. And again, when we do this, we see things like the biggest show up rates we've ever seen. When we eliminate the guessing, we start to see the biggest show up rates we've ever seen, the lowest cost ads, the highest opt-in rates, the highest earnings per lead. We see all of that stuff. I want you to know what's going to work before you go into a launch. I want to know what problems are landing, what mistakes are landing, what topics are working. I want to know what teachings are giving the most ahas, right? So we want to look at our content. We want to look at our emails, our open rates. We want to look at like our downloads. You can even run through play campaigns to test content. There's so much stuff that you can do in order to test what's going to work before you do it. And I want to ask you, do you think that if you knew what titles are going to work, what topics are going to work, what language are going to work based on your best performing content, and you weren't guessing anymore, that you would have, do you think that you would have a higher performing launch than you did last time? Probably. That's why your content should be the testing ground for your launches. So let me give you an example. Let's say through my content and my testing, I look at like my podcast and figured out which episode's getting the most downloads. I looked at Instagram and I realized, okay, the identity, which is another element that you want to use in your launches, but the identity of the person who's resonating with my content is a course creator. That's the language. I'm not going to call them a program owner. I'm not going to call them a group coach. I'm not going to call them a coach. I'm going to call them a course creator. That's what's resonating. The data tells me course creator is what is working, and that's what's resonating. And then I realized, okay, every time I talk about content, engaging content, it works. And every time I talk about how-to content not working for them, I do a thought reversal. It just takes off. I'm like, okay, so this topic works really well. So I know the identity and I know the topic, right? So I could guess at a headline and say, hey, here's the headline of my ad, free webinar, how to create engaging content. That may or may not work. But if I start to look at the data, I could alter that headline to something like free webinar, how course creators can create engaging content without using endless amounts of how-to content. It's like, boom. You have the end result of engaging content, which I know you want. I'm calling out your identity, which is a subconscious trigger. Now you're more likely to pay attention to what I'm saying. And then I say without using endless amounts of how-to content, which I know already works and is a pain point of yours because my content has told me that before we even went into the launch. So now I'm creating these headlines that are unique, speak to the subconscious, have these, get that automated decision communication going, right? So more likely to track the person who has the problem I have, has the pain point I have. They're likely to feel more heard by me. They're going to feel like I understand them better than everyone else. It's going to stop the scroll. It's going to get the lead. And it's more likely now that lead is going to convert than the crappy lead I would have had before. All right. So that is the beginning intro to self-identifying and automated decision-making communication. Those two things alone can alter and change the results you're seeing inside of your launches. If your launches haven't been performing, I promise you have not mastered those two things yet. Now, look, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more frameworks. There's a lot more ways to do it. There's a lot more things to be aware of. Those are the beginning stages of what to do. And again, like I said, it's like learning what to do to ride a bike. You now know what to do. The question is, how do you master all that? How do you put it together? It takes time. How do you find that messaging? How do you learn all those frameworks? In other words, like, how do you get this working throughout your entire brand, all your content, all your emails, all your lives, all your sales pages, your ads, your sales mechanisms, and all that. So the next steps for you, if you're like, Brandon, this is awesome, I want to start doing it. Well, go get our guide. Our guide is going to be an awesome breakdown and go in a little bit more in depth than what we did on the podcast. All you need to do is go to brandonlucero.com/webinar, brandonlucero.com/webinar, and you'll be brought to the opt-in page. And that will show you, break down everything for you. You get the PDF, you get all that stuff. Now, for those of you who are like, Brandon, I didn't even want to read it. I just want you guys to help us with that. When you download that guide, there'll be a calendar to book a link. If you're the type of person who's like sick and tired of your launches being stuck, or plateaued, or declining, or never took off in the first place, and what we broke down today makes sense to you, and you're like, this is exactly what I need, book a time to talk to our team. We will help. We've helped a lot of people go through this exact process. This is the exact process we go through when we create launches, when we've created all those launches I talked about, all the multi-6-figure and the 7-figure. This is what we did. We went through this process. We have it all broken down, all the language patterns. I will be helping you personally look through the messaging, the titles. You're going to have one-on-one calls. You're going to have all of that stuff, making sure that you're not making mistakes and that this is actually finalized and dialed in. So if you're ready for that, you can also book a time to talk with my team. So again, the next 2 steps for you, download the PDF, and when you do that, if you feel like you want to get more help with it, just go ahead and book a time with my team. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Hopefully it helps you get out of your launch plateau that you're stuck in right now. And if you love this episode, please share it, tag us in it, leave us a review on iTunes, and I'll see you all next week. Take care.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.